Good morning, and welcome back to anyone who saw day one of my new series that I am basically just reading one chapter every single day of the Bible. We are going to be reading from the book of Genesis, chapter 2, and then going to have some discussion questions afterwards. If you guys want to write any questions, say any prayers, that would be wonderful. If you have any thoughts, just, put them in the comment section, and I'd love to read them because interaction with you guys would be awesome, and knowing people out there are enjoying, God's content, because I'm reading His Word would be amazing. So I guess we'll get on to the second day. So I'm reading from the book of Genesis. I am continuing with the ESV version, which is English Standard Version from the Bible app. All right. Genesis chapter 2. The seventh day, God rests. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the hosts of them. And on the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all his work that he had done in creation, the creation of man and woman. These are the generations of the heavens and the earth when they were created, in the day that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens. When no bush of the field was yet in the land, and no small plant of the field had yet sprung up, the Lord God had not caused it to rain on the land, and there was no man to work the ground. And a mist was going from the land and was watering the whole face of the ground. Then the Lord God formed the man of dust from the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living creature. And the Lord God planted a garden in Eden in the east, and there he put the man whom he had formed. And out of the ground the Lord God made spring up every tree that is pleasant to sight and good for food. The tree of life was in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. A river flowed out of Eden to water the garden, and there it divided and became 4 rivers. The name of the first is Pishon. It is one that flowed around the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold, and the gold of that land was good. Beldium and onyx stone are there. The name of the second river is Gihon. It is the one that flowed around the whole land of Cush. And the name of the third river is Tigris, which flows east of Assyria. And the fourth river is the Euphrates. The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, You may surely eat of every fruit of the garden, but not the tree of knowledge of good and evil. You shall not eat it, for the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. Then the Lord God said, It is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper fit for him. Now, out of the ground the Lord God had formed every beast of the field and every bird of the heavens, and brought them to the man to see what he would call them. And whatever the man called every living creature, that was its name. The man gave names to all livestock, and to the birds of the heavens, and every beast of the field. But for Adam there was not found a helper fit for him. So the Lord God caused a great sleep to fall upon the man, and while he slept, took one of his ribs and closed up its place with flesh. And the rib that the Lord God had taken from the man he made into a woman, brought her to the man. Then the man said, This at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother, and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And the man and his wife were both naked, and were not ashamed. So, I'm sticking with the 3 questions I had from yesterday. How has chapter 2 of Genesis surprised you? Honestly, within the first couple verses, it's interesting to hear about the 7th day. So in chapter 1, we read that God creates everything within the first 6 days. But why is there a 7th? I believe I believe and find it interesting that God would deem a day of rest, because obviously he's not bound by time, space, or matter. So he doesn't tire. So why? From his vantage point, there is no, or for him, there is no reason. But for us, I think, I know he's an omnipotent being, and thus seeing his creation and the limitations of his creation, he deemed a day for us to rest from the work of the day, or the work of the days within the week. And I think just even that small thing that seems kind of minuscule and can be lost in the message of Genesis, especially even in chapter 2, I think is wonderful. I mean, just deeming a day of rest and tranquility and time to be with yourself, with your family, and with your creator, I think is pretty awesome, to be honest. My second question: are there certain phrases or verses within Genesis chapter 2 that made you take pause? Again, these questions are for you, they're for me. I'd love to hear if you guys had any answers, and any different perspectives, or the same. I pointed out verse 16. I thought that was that gave me a little pause. Verse 16 and 17. And it gave me pause because, it says in verse 16, you may surely eat of every tree of the garden. Okay, so God not only has given us dominion, like we talked about in chapter 1, of all the earth and all the beasts and all living creatures, but now we have basically dominion over all the fruit of these trees that we are given dominion over. But in verse 17, he's very clear, and his only commandment to Adam so far is, but of the tree of knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. I think it's very interesting that he mentions this, because the other important tree that he specifically calls by name is the tree of life. He does not say you cannot eat of this. And I think it's that part's also overlooked for me. I never hear people talking about it. And why is there such a difference between knowing what is good and evil, having the tree of life? What is its purpose? It also says, it gives us a kind of location of where the tree is. It's the tree of life. It's in the midst of the garden. Now, whether they mean the midst as in the middle, or it's the midst as in it's multiple trees, it's dispersed, whatever that means, I think it's interesting that, Moses, who wrote Genesis, being inspired by God, that God made sure that was in there and not any location so far for the tree of good and evil. I don't know. I just, that gave me pause, like, tiny details, but is the weight of this detail important? And I think it's something to ponder on at the very least. And again, why does God mention this in verse 17? But you cannot eat of the tree of what's right and wrong. And so I think that's something to ponder over as well. And my third and final question is, how has chapter 2 of Genesis altered your understanding or thinking? I'd say it's God's empathy towards us. God really does care about our well-being, and physical, but also our mental well-being. His recognition of Adam being alone or without someone he can converse with and enjoy life with. I mean, it specifically, says, I believe in verse 18, I will make him a helper fit for him. Why does God do this? I couldn't tell you, but I am certainly glad he did. I mean, can you imagine your life being alone and not being able to communicate or experience life without other people? It would be miserable. And I think God knew this, and he sought Adam's opinion, because he could have just made woman from the very beginning. He didn't, and there was a reason for this. He didn't also, after saying, okay, Adam, I can tell you're alone or you're lonely. In some form or fashion, God understood this, from whether it was Adam expressing this or just God knowing the human heart. And so he didn't just make woman. He said, Adam, I'm going to allow you to choose all the names of all the animals and all the beasts and all the birds of the heavens, and you can find a fit helper. And Adam stated, none of these are fit for me. So God put him to sleep, into a deep sleep, and from one of Adam's ribs, he made woman. And I think it's very important to understand that when God does this, it's kind of a representation that we are all made of each other. Adam is made from dust. Woman is made from the rib of Adam. But that being said, are we not all the same now? If God is the arbiter and creator of all, therefore anything God touches has life. And so maybe I'm losing the point here, and I hope I'm not confusing anyone, but I think it's kind of wonderful to think that two separate things, dust and live bone, are now the exact same because of the power and just the power of God. I don't know. I probably got a little off track with that, but I kind of am in awe about this. And then I think another thing that kind of altered my understanding a little bit of marriage. I mean, I've always understood, marriage, you truly are one with that other person. For me, it would be, my future wife. And so it says in verses 24 and 25, therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. God is very funny, in my opinion, because again, talking about what I was talking about before is one thing being another, two separate things coming together and being one. Dust and bone are now one. Man and wife are now one. I think a lot of times there are verses within a chapter that are representations of each other, and it's hard to see that. And I think that's one of those things that's just like, see what you're doing there, trying to be sneaky. Well, I mean, it's not very sneaky, but it's kind of just, I love it because it's just that little thing of, wow, no, this being, this God is intelligent. Like, who could make this up? Well, he can. So I think it's a wonderful sign of extreme intelligence to even have these nuances in a book that was, again, written 3,500, this, part of the book is written 3,500 years ago. I'm not calling those people dumb. But if you think they can write all this type of nuance back then, I don't know if they would be able to do that at this level. In fact, I know they can't, which is why it was God inspired. But I don't know. I just found that really interesting. That kind of two things within the same chapter represent each other, and both are bound by God. And so I find that wonderful. And an interesting kind of thing that I saw also was they shall leave his father and his mother. Because again, who brings you into this life? Your father and mother, of course. It takes two people who become one to make one. So you must leave them to become one with someone else. And so I think, I don't know. So that might be something I have to think on more. But I would love to know what you guys think on that. And hopefully I wasn't too confusing. I wasn't too off track. I could probably talk about this one chapter. I could probably talk about every chapter in the Bible for hours, which I think is awesome. But some people might find that kind of boring. But I don't. So I hope you enjoyed. And I will, chapter 3 will come tomorrow. I'll see ya, and God bless.